Hi everybody! Today I'm going to be going behind the scenes of how I make my YouTube videos. So let's get right into the video. Okay, so I am going to be using a separate phone. I'm going to link that phone in the description. It's an iPhone SE 2020. It's also in my kit, which should be linked in the description also, just in case you're wondering. But what I want to do is I want to go behind the scenes on my YouTube channel of how I edit, make my thumbnails, film, things like that. I also am going to be showing you quickly my setup tour, since it has changed a bit since my January one, but mostly just my recording setup, not really my everyday setup. I'm also going to be showing you how I set my videos, like with the ISO and things, because I don't just use the regular camera app. I actually use an app called Premiere Rush. But let me just switch into the screen recording so you can see exactly what I do to set my videos. So jumping right into the screen recording, usually there is something at the bottom that shows all the different settings, but I had to crop the screen recording as it gave some personal information away. But you can see that we have like ISO and shutter that I just showed. We have resolution and frame rate. I'm sorry you can't see the frame rate, but I always shoot in 1080p. Quickly, just explaining shutter speed, you basically just want to double your frame rate for the shutter speed. It's basically blur, but it also changes how light and dark. For the ISO, basically if you turn it up, what happens is it gets brighter, but if you turn the shutter speed down, you can see that it gets more grainy, versus if I just leave it the lowest it can go, it's not very grainy, which is obviously what I want, since I want the videos to look as good as possible. That's just a brief explanation. I'll link a video in the description of how this stuff works in detail. Now into temperature. What I usually like to do is I like to set it at a medium temperature, because what I used to do is let it do auto exposure, but I had a really yellow light, so the white table looked very yellow, which is not what I want. But as you can see here, I'm turning it up and down, and this is like way too cool, but before it was like way too warm, which I'm going to show right now, and that just does not look very good. So I leave it at kind of a middle range, like 4,000 to 5,000 I find is pretty good, like right here. And then tint, I don't usually play around with it. I'm not exactly sure how it works, but I just leave it to 0. And then we also have focus. I'm not exactly sure what focus does either. I usually just leave it on autofocus because I'm not exactly sure what it does, and I don't really want to play around with it. But yeah, I basically just leave it on autofocus. As you can see, I'm zooming in here. I'm sorry you can't see the zoom thing. And if I zoom in too much, it does not look very good. And that basically allows me to zoom in more. I don't usually zoom in now, but before I did, to get the light reflection out of frame, since I use a glossy white kind of thing. So now let's get into the setup. So if we pretty much pick up the phone, as you can hear, the audio is not quite as good since I'm not using my microphone, but here's my iPad, which is currently shooting what you just saw. Over here we have my 2 lights, and I haven't really found the best way to position these, but here they are. Here's my microphone, which I can be a bit more free with since I don't have those 2 lights that I used to have. If we just step a bit farther back, you can see that we have my 2 lights, which are pretty much pointing here. I do a fair amount of color grading. They're like Hishui, I think. They were actually listed under Zimtown. I'm not really sure. Again, here's my microphone. It's the Blue Snowball Ice. I showed this in my setup tour. As you can see, my recording setup is a bit different. I still have like my gear over here. It's just a bit differently managed. I have some yarn for some reason. And then of course here's my timer, but it does have some shadows, as you can see here, so I definitely do some color grading. But now I'm just going to go behind the scenes on filming. So I'm going to have the second camera angle so that you can see what I'm doing. Okay guys, so going behind the scenes on filming, as you can see, I pretty much just have my iPad, which again I showed earlier. But for filming, I don't write a script. I probably will start doing it soon, but I pretty much just say like, hi everybody, like I did at the beginning of this video. And then I pretty much just like say what the video's about. I always make sure to connect my microphone. I'm just gonna move the camera here. But again, make sure to connect your microphone if you have one. I have this USB to iPad adapter that I bought, and I basically say what I'm gonna say. So like, let's say I'm doing a Z-Long Mini 4x4 review, I'm gonna say like, let's say the price and the weight. So it's pretty simple. Again, just put the microphone and then just have the iPad recording on Premiere Rush. So now I'm just gonna say I'm done filming. So anyway, now what I do is I take it before or after, but in this case, I'm just going to take the thumbnail after. Sometimes I take the thumbnails outside, but it hasn't been that nice, so I haven't been taking too many outside. So what I do is I take the white background away and the microphone, but I leave the lights where they are, and I pretty much keep the camera settings the same. So anyway, now let me just go do that. As you can see here, most things have stayed the same, like the lights and the iPad, and of course the tripod also, but sometimes I do move it. So sometimes I might just not want like a top view, so like I might want a side view, for example. So what I'll do is I'll just move the tripod like this, then you can pretty much just get a side view. Of course I might zoom in a little bit since this is not the best, since you can see the stuff in the background, or I'll go down a little bit like this. And then basically what I'll do is just take the thumbnail. I'm just gonna take a test thumbnail right now. Okay, so I just took the thumbnail. It's not too hard, the process that I use, but it works pretty well, and it's a lot better than the white background that I used to use, the one that I used for filming. Now after that, I'm just gonna show you how I make my thumbnails. Okay guys, so anyway, opening my thumbnail app, it's called Thumbnail Maker. I'm sorry this is in portrait because it would not let me record in landscape, but anyway, I'm just gonna make a new project. Okay, so as you can see, I have my photo imported, which is the Z-Long Mini 4x4 photo, and it's just a random photo I took. I wasn't really thinking too much about it, but anyway, the first step is I add text, as you can see here, so I'll just write like Z-Long Mini 4x4 review. I also always change the font to the new font, and then I change the color to black and then reposition it. And although there are other features you can do, I'm just going to say I'm done since I mostly just add text. Okay guys, anyway, now jumping into an app called Focus. As you can see, this app blurs the photo, and I've imported the photo off screen since it showed some personal information. But anyway, this basically just blurs the background. You can change like the aperture size. I'm not going to go over this. The focus, other things. It does a pretty good job at blurring the background. Now I'm just going to save it to my camera roll. Anyway, now the third app I use is Adobe Lightroom, which is a really good photo editing app. The process that I use is I first brighten the photo a bit so I can turn down and up the exposure. Obviously you don't want it too exposed, so I just turn it up a little bit so that it still looks natural. Usually mess with the contrast, but I do mess with the highlights a bit just to make it look a bit brighter. Obviously, again, you do not want to overdo this since it will just look really unnatural. As you can see, I'm turning the shadows up a bit, the whites a bit down actually, since it does look a bit too white, and then the blacks, they just turn up or down depending on the photo. Jumping into color, I don't usually turn the temperature up or down unless it's a too warm or too cold photo, but I mostly just play around with the vibrance and the saturation just to make it look a bit better. As you can see, it does look a bit better, but again, you do not want to do this too much. So I go into detail and I change the noise reduction, which pretty much gets rid of all those like grainy images. I turn it up a bit just to get rid of the noise. Obviously you don't want to do it too much since it doesn't do the best job, and then I also do the same for color noise reduction. Lastly, I just press remove KA and enable lens correction. I'm not exactly sure what this does, but I find it looks better. Just export the photo. So now I'm going to show you how I edit my videos. Okay, the first app I use is iMovie. This is just a section from earlier parts of the video, but as you can see, I just have raw footage, and basically what I do is I just basically get rid of all the pauses. So like I'm just going to trim off the beginning here, as you can see. I forgot to show it, but what I do to put my intro in is I just make a cut and then I grab it from my camera roll and then just put it in pretty easy. Even though this is clearly not done and there are a lot of places that need cuts, I'm just going to say I'm done with doing the cuts, so I'm just going to export it now. The next app I use is Premiere Brush, which I use for color correcting. Pretty much only use this app for color grading, but I'm just going to show you how I do it. Always do make my own presets because I'm not just going to use a regular one just because my videos are different than other people's, obviously. So usually I just turn up the exposure a bit and like the vibrance up a bit just to make it look a bit better, since sometimes the light can be pretty dark. However, depending on where my lights are, I might use a different preset for one video versus another one, and if I film on my black desk, I will also use a different preset. So yeah, it does depend on the video, again, because of where I place the lights, but yeah, I just have a couple presets that I use. Now I'm just gonna say that the footage is done color grading and I'm gonna export it now. Anyway, the last app that I use is CapCut, which is a very good free editing software. Basically use this for all my effects and overlay. One really neat thing that you can do, in my opinion, is that you can stabilize the footage so that if it's shaky, it's gonna get like a little less shaky, which I really like. As you can see here, I can also do some color grading, but I find Premiere Rush is better. I also changed the speed up to 100 times faster, which is really helpful because sometimes I do want to do time lapses, and this is really helpful for me at least. As you can see, you can also do custom speed. What I really like about this is that you can add up to 6 layers of text, I believe, and then you can change like the color and the font and place it wherever you want on screen. So as you can see, I'm doing that right now. And it's a very good app for this just because a lot of times I use a lot of overlays, and this supports it a lot better than like Video Leap, which is the software I sometimes use in iMovie. And then pretty much the same thing for overlays. The other thing that I really like about this is that you can add like effects. Like you can just add like basic ones like portrait open or other ones, and I really do like this. I haven't really used them too much, but I can see them being very helpful. But after I add like all the overlays, text, and like effects, I'm pretty much ready to export. And once I export, my video is pretty much done, so let me just go do that right now. So yes guys, this is not on my white table because I put my poster board under my bed. Anyway guys, I hope you enjoyed the behind the scenes video. Make sure to like, subscribe, and see everybody later.